one of the coordinators of the Clinton campaign and a feminist of many years in New Hampshire.
Judy, it's good to meet you.
Good to see you too. All right.
Thank you very much.
Judy, we're going to leave from the crowd because we've got Joe Clinton's position on choice, and we think it's been misrepresented, so we'd like to pass out some leaflets here today. No problem.
Great. Terrific. Thanks a lot.
I love it. I love it.
You love that.
Son is an SNL cheat, but his son won't have to leave. Remember how they burned their driveway.
My name is Carol Bousquet. I'm the project coordinator. I'm an interested American, a voter, and proudly a feminist. I'd like to thank you all for coming and want to take this opportunity, of course, to thank the committee responsible for organizing today's event. We met for the first time 20 days ago. Although I was excited about the possibility of pulling this event off, it was their counsel that I relied on. They embraced the idea, ran with it, and here we are. A heartfelt thank you. I'd like to recognize other organizations that have endorsed today's event but who aren't published in the program. The Women's Resource Center of the Nashua YWCA, the Granite State Coalition, the Concord Feminist Health Center in support of lesbian visibility. Other financial contributors not in print in the program include the National Draft Cuomo for President Committee. We're grateful to all contributors listed in the program for the seed money to begin mounting this project. However, we will pass the hat, and if you're able, we greatly appreciate any donation. Lastly, I am very grateful to the National Organization for Women, both the Nashua chapter, the state organization, and the national organization for their support, bringing this event to fruition. I'd also like to introduce you at this point, let me just back up. I'd like to introduce you to Vice President. We have a few people in the crowd that you deserve to know, who we appreciate having turned out to hear our message today. Endicott Chubb Peabody is running for Vice President of the United States. Chubb, thank you for coming. I'm going to dip you here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can I say thank you?
Sure, just say thank you. Give me a wave. That'd be great.
It's Carol.
Yes, it is.
Carol, thank you very much for the introduction, and congratulations everyone for turning out today. Anyone who's had anyone in their family who has suffered from breast cancer knows the terrible toil, the terrible sorrow, the terrible waste that results when this is not caught early and when the work of research is not done. So I am happy to join with all of you to say to our candidates, let's do more on this. Let's save good lives that we need and research on breast cancer.
We had a number of others. I hate to leave anybody out at this point. Is anyone here from the Carey group? We were expecting Jessie Rasmussen. Okay, if she's not in the crowd, unfortunately, she didn't make it. I know she was keeping a tight schedule. We do know that Hillary Clinton is here. here representing of course, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton, Democratic presidential candidate. We're extremely proud of Hillary. Hillary Rodham Clinton, a graduate of Wellesley College and Yale Law School, is an attorney in Little Rock, Arkansas. She's a partner in the Rose Law Firm in Little Rock, judged by the National Law Journal as one of the most powerful in America. She chairs the board of directors for the Children's Defense Fund and the American Bar Association Commission on Women in the Profession. She serves on the board of directors of the National Center on Education and the Economy, Walmart Stores Incorporated, TCBY Enterprises Incorporated, the Lafarge Corporation, also the Arkansas Children's Hospital and Children's Television Workshop, and the Southern Development Bank Corporation. In her spare time, she helps her husband and his candidate for the vice presidential nomination. I really appreciate her interest, and of course Bill Clinton's as well, in being here today. Thank you for coming, Hillary. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I am delighted to be here and to join in this statement that the rally represents. I'm also delighted to be a Democrat and to be a member of a party whose presidential candidates all are pro-choice. And I hope that this election will give us the opportunity to make a statement on behalf of all of the issues that are important to women and their changing roles and responsibilities. And if it does, then we will not only protect the right to choose, we will have a Family and Medical Leave Act, we will have child care, we will have decent research about breast cancer, we will begin once again to right the economic balance so that women and their children are not the most disadvantaged members of this society. That should be the agenda. Thank you. Appreciate that. I'm part of the team. At this point in time, I am also proud to introduce to you, representing Bob Kerrey, is his sister, Nebraska State Senator Jessie Rasmussen. Year in the state legislature, it was a real awakening for me to find out that many of our rights as women are beginning to be taken away. And we need to all wake up and step forward and recognize this is the beginning of a downhill trend if we don't do something about it now. I'm excited about this year's opportunity to have a new president that recognizes that women are citizens of this country too. Thank you all, and get out there and vote. You bet. Okay. Can we stay up here? That's fine. These stairs are okay, great. Today, New Hampshire Women United will send a message to the present administration, to the candidates, and to the nation. We won't go back. We are keenly aware that during these last 10 years, women's status has diminished dangerously, and indeed, we won't go back. With our nation reeling from the economic morass we are in, it is a national shame that our country has overlooked over half our nation's human resources by not ever taking a true course of action to fully empower women. Women represent 2/3 of all poor adults. More than 80% of full-time working women make less than $20,000 a year, nearly double the male rate. The average female college graduate today earns less than a man with no more than a high school diploma. American women, in fact, face the worst gender-based pay gap in the developed world. Less than 8% of all federal and state judges, less than 6% of all law partners, and less than 1/2% of top corporate managers are women. There are only 3 female state governors, 2 female U.S. senators, and 2 Fortune 500 chief executives. There are only 19 women among 4,000 corporate officers and directors, and more than half the Fortune companies have no women at all. Unlike all industrialized nations, the U.S. government still has no family leave and child care programs, and more than 99% of American private employers don't offer child care either. Reproductive freedoms are in greater jeopardy today than a decade ago. The availability of different forms of contraceptives has declined. Research for new birth control has virtually halted. New laws restrict abortion, or even information about abortion for young and poor women. The recent administration have manipulated the Supreme Court, and the U.S. Senate has been found in contempt of women with their callous disregard for Anita Hill and for their confirmation of Clarence Thomas. In 30 states, in 1992, it is still legal for husbands to rape their wives, and only 10 states have laws mandating arrest for domestic violence, even though battering was the leading cause of injury to women in the late 80s. Federal funding for battered women's shelters has been withheld. In the 80s, almost half of all homeless women, the fastest growing segment of the homeless, were refugees of domestic violence. We've had to struggle for every gain these last 25 years. There have been some. However, the last 10 years has undermined what little progress has actually occurred. Consider how this directly affects our nation's productivity, and consider how all the issues we'll discuss here today affects our children's futures. This administration must be held accountable for underwriting the institutionalization of sexism. While its claim to fame is the choreography of peace between and among nations, our own nation's domestic programs have suffered. To President Bush, hear us now and know in November, we won't go back. We will fight back. We will fight back. To all the justices on the Supreme Court, especially New Hampshire's own Justice Souter, we won't go back. We will fight back. We will fight back. To Clarence Thomas and his friends, the Senate Judiciary Committee, we won't go back. To the brutal conspiracy of violence and intimidation wreaked by the so-called Operation Rescue, but more aptly named Operation Oppress You, we won't go back. To the Federal Drug Administration and Dow Corning for pandering to profit at the expense of women's health, we will not go back. When 76-year-old Florence Holloway of Alton, New Hampshire, is brutally raped on Easter Eve and then must face a system whereby the district attorney plea bargains for the man who was caught in her bed, to legislators across the nation, let's fix the system. We won't go back. Suffragists struggled for the right to vote for a full 72 years. We've had that right for exactly 72 another 70 years before we see a woman president? Let's move forward by voting and by electing more women to office, because surely we won't go back. Our lesbian sisters must face all of the challenges of this political climate of hostility toward women and women's rights, plus must struggle for their own right to enjoy the benefits of full citizenship. We will continue to move forward together on these issues, because surely we won't go back. Women's history, for example, the military woman's story, is a history of dedication, commitment, and sacrifice. It's untold. Their historic contributions are invisible. They forgot to add the names of those women who lost their lives in Southeast Asia to the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., and hence we have to build our own at the entrance to the Arlington Cemetery. They didn't forget how effective we can be, as witnessed in the Gulf War, did they? To New Hampshire's Governor Judd Gregg, let's remove the punitive 1848 statutes still on the books that would cause women and doctors who have or perform abortions to be jailed. And let's do it expeditiously, because we won't go back. I would like to, at this point, before we progress into our speakers, introduce to you the state president of the national organization, Judy Blodczak, who's been side by side with me on this project. She's always been an inspiration to me and has been extremely active and committed to the women's movement for a good number of years in the attempt to make the world a better place for her family and for you and for me. I'd like to introduce Cindy Winkler and also thank the business and professional women of New Hampshire for making it possible for Cindy to come here and for carrying the message to the National Board to get us a speaker. The BPW has testified in front of Congress recently on the issue of sexual harassment and the glass ceiling. Cindy is the second vice president of the National Federation of BPW. She's a past president of the state of Iowa BPW and is an active enthusiast and motivator for high school students in women helping girls with choices, and is also active in women's economic venture enterprises, assisting women business owners. Cindy Winkler.
It's wonderful for me to be here. I'm happy to join with other women's organizations and be part of your goal to the primary. As a representative of BPW USA, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to speak to you about women and work. BPW USA was founded in 1919 to improve the status of women in the workforce and continues today to be the voice of working women. Our mission is to promote equity, economic self-sufficiency, and full participation for all women in the workforce. BPW USA is active on a variety of workforce equity issues. However, two issues in particular have been much on our minds in the past few months: the glass ceiling and sexual harassment. The glass ceiling and sexual harassment are different faces of the same coin, the coin of job discrimination. Over the past 2 decades, women and minorities have made unprecedented strides into the workforce, yet discrimination due to gender and race is still very much a problem. Women in America want to make policy, not coffee. It's more than a bumper sticker slogan. It's a matter of simple fairness. Outdated stereotypes about what women want in the workplace hinder their entry into an advancement in the workplace. What women want is the same as what all people want: good jobs with sufficient wages, equitable changing workforce. What women in reality have in the workplace is fraught with discrimination. More than 25 years after Title VII was passed, prohibiting sex discrimination in the workplace, women are still conspicuously absent in the ranks of top management. Although women comprise 40% of all executive, management, and administrative positions, they remain employed in the middle and lower ranks of corporate America. This phenomenon has been termed the glass ceiling. The glass ceiling is second-generation discrimination. Women are no longer prohibited from entering certain occupations. However, they are prevented from entering the pipeline of top-level management. The glass ceiling is far from being shattered, as the following statistics eloquently testify. The Department of Labor reports that indeed there is a glass ceiling beyond which women and minorities do not advance, and that is found at lower levels than expected. In this study, women comprise 37% of the workforce, but only 6.6% of the executive level managers were women. According to a Fund for the Feminist Majority Foundation study, less than 3% of the top jobs at Fortune 500 companies were held by women, and only 5 women are CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies. It's 1%. According to a Fortune magazine survey of 799 public companies, out of over 4,000 of the highest paid officers and directors, less than 1/2 of 1% were women. These statistics represent people, real women who are excluded from top management positions, not because of their capabilities, but because of their gender. If 97 out of 100 corporate officers of the Fortune 500 companies were women, if 99 out of every 100 CEOs in Fortune 500 companies were women, and if 98 out of 100 U.S. senators were women, I don't think the men in this country would feel as though they were full participants. Women seek a level playing ground, not special treatment. We firmly believe that corporations with more women at the top of their management structure will improve their bottom line. The attitudes that prevent women and minorities from advancing into management positions are the same attitudes underlying sexual harassment. Recently, the nation was gripped by the Senate hearings on the sexual harassment allegations against Judge Clarence Thomas. The Senate Judiciary Committee gave America a compelling tutorial of sexual harassment. This hearing ripped a scab off an ugly wound in the psyche of American women. Professor Hill's testimonies struck a raw nerve among women who are angry about the Judiciary Committee's treatment of Professor Hill. She broke the conspiracy of silence on sexual harassment. That silence of powerlessness is born out of the fear of not being believed and out of the hope that the harassment won't continue. Women all over the nation are now beginning to share their own stories of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment remains a serious workplace problem. 50% to 85% of American women will experience some form of sexual harassment during their academic or working life, according to a study conducted by the National Council for Research on Women. Almost 90% of the Fortune 500 companies have received sexual harassment complaints. Over a third have been hit with lawsuits, and nearly a fourth have been repeatedly sued, according to a 1988 Working Woman magazine survey. 42% of women responding to a U.S. Merit Systems Protection Board survey reported being sexually harassed in the 2 prior years. It's all too easy to make a joke of sexual harassment. It's all too easy to blame the victim. It's all too easy to judge the credibility of charges through the filter of one's own experience. It's all too easy to say, boys will be boys, or shrug sexual harassment off as one of the costs of doing business. Yet, it's not at all too easy for the victim to shrug off the all too real costs of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment not only thwarts a woman's career opportunities, but also takes its toll physically and emotionally. Anxiety attacks, headaches, sleep disturbances, eating disorders, and lowered self-esteem and feelings of powerlessness are common. Women are 9 times more likely to quit their jobs, 5 times more likely to transfer, and 3 times more likely to lose their jobs because of sexual harassment. The victims are not the only ones affected. In 1987, U.S. Merit Systems Protection Board survey estimated that during a 2-year period, sexual harassment cost the government $267 million in lost productivity and turnover. Discrimination against women in the workplace is bad business. Businesses cannot afford to continue to underutilize half of their available workforce. Discrimination such as the glass ceiling and sexual harassment prevents women and minorities from truly benefiting from their training and efforts and from fully contributing their abilities and knowledge to the productivity of our country. Although the Industrial Revolution has given way to the information age and the standard corporate man has been replaced by women and men of all types, the American dream has remained constant. The possibility for everyone to go as far as their abilities and efforts will take them is integral to the American psyche. Yet the axiom, work hard and you will succeed, shouldn't only be true for certain segments of our population. Women in the workforce are here to stay. To allow gender or race to define occupational rewards disheartens millions of American workers. Workplace discrimination hampers not only the lives of real women and men, but also hinders society as a whole. We can no longer afford to ignore the real costs of discrimination. We must strive for even-handed opportunities and recognition in the workplace for everyone. Working together, employees, businesses, academics, the government, we can remove the roadblocks encountered by women and minorities. It's time for all Americans to share in the American dream and experience equity, economic self-sufficiency, and full participation in the workforce. We won't go back.
Thank you, Cindy. About a month ago, I got a call from Carol Bousquet asking me to help with this rally. I said yes, but I wondered if we could pull it off. I want you to know that this rally was conceived by one person. She knew she needed support, but she proves how one person can make an incredible difference. I'd like you to applaud Carol Bousquet for both her vision and her work on this project. Carol eloquently listed some of the major reasons why women are angry and why we won't go back. If you want to find ways to make a difference, you can do a few things. Right now in New Hampshire, we will return to punitive 1848 statutes that would put a woman and a doctor in jail in the event that a woman has an abortion. There is currently a repeal bill in the New Hampshire House. Please call your representative to ask them to support the repeal bill. That bill number is House Bill 1407. Another thing that you can do is to attend the We Won't Go Back March for Women's Lives that is to be held on Sunday, April 5th in Washington, D.C. The National Organization for Women is organizing that march, and already over 150 other groups have endorsed it. Please join New Hampshire now at the march. We are organizing buses to leave from 5 communities in New Hampshire. Bus forms are available at the Now table. If you're planning on attending at your own, you can assemble with us at the Ellipse at 10 a.m. The march is to begin at noon. Marches are exhilarating and empowering. I'll be there, and I certainly hope you will too. And now I'd like to introduce the next speaker. I think it's a little ironic, but very fitting that our speaker on childcare is a man. One of the results of equality for women should be that men are viewed as equal in terms of child rearing and nurturing. Roger Brown is the CEO and one of the founders of Bright Horizons Children's Centers. Another of the founders is his wife, Linda Mason. Bright Horizons is an organization that establishes and operates worksite and community centers, community-based childcare centers. It is emerging as the industry standard in childcare facilities. Previous to his experience with Bright Horizons, Mr. Brown instituted and oversaw emergency relief and development projects for the Save the Children Foundation. He has both the business knowledge and a commitment to the world's young. I can't resist adding that Mr. Brown is also a dad. He has a daughter who is 3 and a son who is 11 months. Please welcome Roger Brown.
Thank you very much. It's delightful to be here. I did offer my wife as a substitute, or probably a much more effective speaker, but both Judy and the other members of the committee thought it might be nice to have a man talk. I do have to admit that my wife is at home with the 2 children, but I would have been willing to be home with the children had she wanted to come do this in my place. We did found the organization together. Bright Horizons was named last year as one of the 85 best companies in the country for working mothers. We're very proud of that. And I think it's also important that men step up and start talking about childcare as well, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Let me ask you a question. There are 40 million people in this country, out of about 250 million, who are in households that have young children. And by that I mean children under 6 years old. And yet childcare is virtually an invisible issue in this presidential campaign. Why do you think that is? My theory is that we are the sleepy majority, not the silent majority, but we're sleep deprived. We're trying to pay our mortgage. We're trying to pay for expensive childcare, and believe me, I know how expensive it can be because I not only charge a lot of parents for it, but I have to pay for it as well. We're trying to keep our marriages together. We're trying to keep our jobs. We're trying to find jobs if we've lost our jobs. We're trying to be good parents. It's all I can do to keep up with the debates and with the political campaign, much less play any active role in it. I get home after the 6 o'clock news is over. I feed my children. I try to read to them and be a good dad. I get them to bed, and by 9:30 or 10, if I'm not in bed, then I'm going to be exhausted for the rest of the week. And my daughter likes to hear Raffi on the way to school, and my son wants me to tell him stories, so I don't listen to the radio. So it's been a pleasure to be here and find out a little bit about what's going on in the campaign. I spent most of my working career overseas, the most recent experience in Sudan. If you went to a country like Sudan and they said, we have a food shortage here, so we've decided to feed all the children who are 6 years and older, but we're not going to feed anything to the children who are 6 years and younger. You think these people are out of their minds. And in fact, when you do emergency nutritional interventions overseas, you target your efforts towards the youngest children because they're the ones who are most vulnerable. But for some bizarre reason in this country, we've decided that when a child is 6, they should get fully financed public education. But when a child is 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, they deserve nothing. And that, I think, is perverse. And I think it puts an incredible strain on working families. Families with young children tend to be the ones who are at the earliest stages of their career and therefore have less earning power and less ability to deal with the high cost of childcare. On the other hand, childcare providers like ourselves who are trying to keep tuitions reasonable can't pay our teachers a living wage. So we're caught in a real bind, and I think it's an issue that's got to be raised and put on the political agenda. It strikes me as really kind of strange that the big issue in this campaign is the economy. Hearing presidential candidates talk about what they're going to do for the economy is like hearing doctors talk about how they're going to cure the common cold. You and I know that there is no cure. We know that it would be delightful to be the president who gets elected when the economy decides on its own accord to turn around, because then you get to be honored as a hero. Ronald Reagan went through that experience, and it's a lot of fun. If George Bush knew how to cure this economy, he would have already done it. But not just to bash on George Bush. I'm not convinced any candidate has a solution. So we spend most of the time in this campaign talking about the thing we have the least amount of control over. But the one thing we do know is this next president is going to get to decide what to do with between $50 billion and $100 billion a year of the peace dividend. And we've worked hard for the last 30, 35 years to earn this, and it's time we took some control over how it's spent. If we could take somewhere between $50 and $100 billion and apply it to child care, we could make our country the most progressive country in the whole world when it comes to providing good quality child care to families. We could probably do it for a whole lot less money. So in closing, let me applaud you for making sure that child care does remain on the top of the priority list as a women's issue. But let's also try to get doctors and nurses and hospitals to declare child care a public health issue. And let's try to get economists to declare it an issue of international competitiveness. And let's get corporations to make it an issue of productivity and retention and reducing absenteeism and increasing job satisfaction. And let's get public schools to see it as an issue of school readiness. And finally, for people with conscience, let's try to make child care an issue of intergenerational equity and justice. Because if we don't invest in our children, we're going to screw this world up pretty severely. So I thank you for having me, and I look forward to seeing what you say on Tuesday. Thank you very much.
On the issue of women and violence, I'd like to introduce to you Janet Putnam, who is the educational coordinator for the Women's Crisis Center of the Manchester YWCA. She previously served on the board of the Boston Now, helped organize the New Hampshire Take Back the Night, and was involved in the Cambridge Women's Center. Janet's developed and implemented community education programs on sexual assault and domestic violence. She addresses schools, civic, and church groups on these topics, testifies at legislative hearings, trains police and hospital staff, and directs volunteer training for crisis lines. Thank goodness she's here and she exists. Let's welcome her, please.
Why don't you all jump up and down for about 30 seconds before I start? I think the rest of us are going to try and keep our speeches real short because we know you're all real strong supporters of what we have to say, and in some ways we're preaching to the converted. I'm hoping that you're going to pick up some catchphrases or some statistics that you can use as you speak to the candidates over the next day and a half as they try and woo your vote. I'm speaking both on behalf of the Women's Crisis Service and on behalf of the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, which is a composite group of centers like ours throughout the state doing work on this issue. Violence against women is at epidemic proportions in America. Senator Biden published a report in 1990 which confirmed that. A woman is beaten in her home every 15 seconds, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, and the FBI reports that a woman is raped every 5 minutes, 12 women an hour. Statistically, we are safer on the streets in the middle of the night than we are in our own homes. In our own homes is where we run the greatest risk of assault, physical injury, and murder. And those murders are committed by, for the most part, members of our own families. Just what I've said to this moment should convince every single candidate running for president that this is one of the major issues they should be talking about. But unfortunately, that's not the case. In addition, this violence affects all segments of society, regardless of women's age, race, class, educational background, sexual orientation, or religious affiliation. So candidates shouldn't run the risk with this issue of alienating any segment of the voting population, except perhaps the perpetrators of this violence, who we know are, in the majority of cases, men, the overwhelming majority of cases, men. So I don't have a good answer for you why the candidates aren't talking about this issue, except that they don't care about women. That's the message I get by them not talking about this issue. When the hate crimes bill was being discussed in Congress at the national level, two of the arguments against including women as a group included that there are too many incidents of violence against women to count. They know it's a big issue. And that crimes against women aren't biased crimes because they're most often perpetrated by men who know the victims. So the fact that we know our perpetrators is held against us to say that we're not singled out as women, we're singled out as wives and life partners and girlfriends to receive this violence. I don't know, to me it still sounds like bias against women, but the congressional people don't seem to agree with us on that one. We need to raise our voices and cast our votes and give the candidates a clear message that we won't accept this treatment and that we won't accept the argument that violence against women is a private issue or that it's only a women's issue. Like with the issues of daycare and sexual harassment, the issue of violence in women's lives takes a great effect on a lot of segments of the world besides women themselves. For example, in families where women battering occurs, the rate of child abuse and neglect is 1,500% higher than the national average. That costs us money in tax dollars because it costs us money in foster care and DCYS expenses. In addition, we know that violence is passed from generation to generation, so that if we don't step in and break this cycle soon, we're raising a complete generation that's going to repeat the pattern. In addition, since we know the candidates are really hot on crime, remember that the greatest majority of violent criminals grew up in abusive families. If the candidates are really concerned about taking a bite out of crime, they'll work to stop the repeat of this generational violence. In addition, like with child care issues and sexual harassment, abuse-related absenteeism results in an estimated economic loss to the nation of $3 to $5 billion annually. That's just on the domestic violence side. So if candidates are really concerned about the economy, they should be addressing the issue of violence against women so that women are safe and healthy enough to come to work on a regular basis. The third issue that the candidates have been talking about some is health care. If they're really concerned about health care, they'll be talking about violence against women. Former Surgeon General Koop said that domestic violence is the single major cause of injury to women in the U.S. 20% of emergency room visits by women are caused by battery. Battered women accrue an estimated $100 million in abuse-related medical bills. If we're concerned about decreasing the cost of medical care in this country, we should be concerned about stopping the original reason women are needing to seek medical care. The same statistics apply for sexual assault survivors, who in addition, if they don't get good intervention from a crisis service or a therapist, develop long-term symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And we know that treating someone for alcoholism or an eating disorder or a sleeping disorder costs an awful lot more than what it would cost to send someone to therapy for 10 or 15 sessions. My final theme is that physical battery and sexual assault are indeed crimes under our current laws. 3 to 4 million women are battered each year, and the majority of those women are battered in more than one instance, which means that there are 3 to 4 million criminals out there, the majority of whom are not receiving any penalty for their crime. Catch this one. 31% of all female homicide victims in 1988 were killed by their husbands or boyfriends. People who supposedly care about them and are committed to protect them are killing them. On the sexual assault side, during the 1980s, during the Republican years, the rape rate in the U.S. rose nearly 4 times as fast as the total crime rate. This is not an issue that's just about greater visibility. It's an issue about greater violence happening in women's lives. And if we care about women, we're going to give candidates a very clear message that they need to care about what happens in women's lives as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. When it comes to women's health care, the lack of equality between men and women is obvious. There is less research funded for diseases that affect only women. Women are routinely excluded from clinical studies for diseases such as heart disease and stroke, and the health industry is allowed to insert devices into our bodies that have not had adequate testing. Our next speaker is well aware of these issues. Virginia Sofa from Vermont is the founder and president of the Breast Cancer Action Group. Ms. Sofa is actively involved in shaping the breast cancer grassroots movement. Ms. Sofa was also involved in Do the Right Thing, a grassroots letter-writing campaign last October to call attention to the epidemic levels of breast cancer. Unfortunately, those letters were delivered to President Bush and Congress during the Thomas Hill hearings and became yet another victim of that scandal. Professionally, Ms. Sofa is a medical journalist and author. She has recently completed a book that is to be published later this year. The book is entitled Beyond Breast Cancer, From the Personal to the Political. We think this merging of personal and political will interest us all. Virginia Sofa.
Good afternoon. It is truly a pleasure to be here today because we are the people that will make a difference in who moves into the White House and who works in the Senate and the House of Representatives. Your votes can make a difference in our nation's health priorities. All women are at risk for breast cancer. Why? Because we don't know what causes it or how to prevent it. Breast cancer represents the single largest number of new cancers diagnosed in this country. 950,000 women have died from breast cancer since 1960. 50% of these women have died since Reagan and Bush moved into the White House. It is up to each one of us to pass the word. There is a mass murderer on the loose, killing 5 women every single hour. And the Bush administration is so out of touch that they are busy educating and arresting substance abusers instead of trying to find and stop this killer. Last year, I went to the National Institutes of Health to testify before the new Office on Women's Health. I left these hearings thinking this was a historic occasion. Finally, there was a special Office on Women's Health to focus on women achieving equal participation in health research and research development. But now I think I was being naive. Last week, I received from this office the Public Health Service Action Plan for Women's Health. This plan establishes that the issues having the most significant impact on the status of women are AIDS, smoking, alcohol, and other drug dependency and abuse. I want to tell you that breast cancer is the leading cause of death in women ages 15 to 54. Breast cancer research is not addressed in this publication until goal number 27. And their current plan for reversing the breast cancer epidemic is more mammography screening. Studies show only 3 out of 10 women whose breast cancer are detected by screening live to see their 8-year anniversary. If early detection were going to solve our problem, we would already be seeing the results. Mammography screening has failed to show its effectiveness in the reduction of deaths, as has the pap smear. It's time to stop fooling ourselves. Early detection hasn't prevented anyone from getting breast cancer, and we can't buy this solution any longer. The other day, it occurred to me that the 1960s produced both a generation of women willing to burn their bras and a machine to burn our breasts. I don't think this was an accident, and perhaps it was even an unconscious backlash. We once stood up to say, bras were symbolic of how women are restricted. Now we need to rebel in the same way against having our breasts squeezed between two pieces of hard plastic and radiated. There is an alternative to mass screening. This is what our tax dollars are currently supporting. 70% of the breast cancer research effort is for mammography programs. And this, I want you to know, mammograms are just another way of humiliating, degrading, and abusing women's bodies. It's not enough for us just not to report for our annual breast assault. No, we need to demand that the Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Disease Control stop using our tax dollars to promote mammograms and start to develop non-radiation, non-assaultive techniques such as a blood marker, just like they have for prostate cancer. One of the programs described in this public health plan is a once-a-year lifetime campaign. Is called Once a Year for a Lifetime. This campaign, which is a cooperative effort between Revlon and NBC and the National Association of Broadcasters, is a poor use of their time and money. 30% of the women over age 50 are helped by mammograms, but mammograms have potentially detrimental results for women under 50 and are not recommended at all for women under 35. It is the women in the category between 15 and 34 that breast cancer is the leading cause of death. And these younger women have only one method of early detection, and that is breast self-exam. When I question this issue, I am told that mammograms are the best thing we have. But I am saying it's not good enough. Public education programs are not currently representing the limitations of today's technology. We have only achieved the equivalent of a black and white TV. If a woman dies from breast cancer, the pat explanation is she didn't catch it early enough. We are not only being charged, but we are being blamed for our own deaths. This insult lives because the almighty patriarchal establishment does not want to take responsibility. But who else is responsible for developing a test that can detect cancer at a pre-cancerous stage? And how much longer are we going to have to wait before there is a test suitable for women of all ages? Why don't we know any more about what is causing breast cancer today than we did 2,000 years ago? And finally, who is going to be responsible for administering the treatments that are going to save our lives? The only thing we can be blamed for is that too many women have accepted the guilt while dying quietly, and their healthier sisters weep privately. Now that breast cancer is indeed out of control, it is our fault for not speaking up about our dissatisfaction sooner. Women's health has a long way to go and will not get the attention it needs until we get vocal. You're absolutely right. It is time to rebake the pie, and it's time to clean up the White House. We need $1 to $2 billion for prevention research. Every dollar the government is spending on screening education programs, for every one of those dollars, you and I are spending $60 to $100 for our annual exam. This isn't getting closer to knowing how to prevent breast cancer. What our government has been giving us is the smallest amount possible to appease our fears about an epidemic that is literally ravaging our bodies, our bank books, and our lives. It is time to let Bush know we have awakened. The guys aren't going to save us. We believe in ourselves, and we will take responsibility to say what we want. We can eliminate this threat from our lives by becoming a strong breast cancer resistance movement. Some men chose not to participate in the Vietnam War, either because they didn't agree with the cause or because they saw we couldn't win. These men had a choice whether they would put their lives on the line. We don't have a choice. 46,000 women will die from breast cancer this year, and next year, and the year after. 1 year of breast cancer deaths is equivalent to all the lives that were lost during the Vietnam War. Therefore, I invite you today to do something about this. Make certain that every person you vote for understands the reason that breast cancer prevention research must become our national priority. Take one of these handouts and express your outrage about the current approach to breast cancer research. And please share this information with every person you talk to, because together I believe we will make a difference.
She chaired the International Women's Year State Meeting, was a delegate to the National Women's Meeting in Houston, and also served in the Concord City Council for 9 years. We're very proud to have such a powerful woman in the state of New Hampshire.
Oh, great, thank you. I will. Okay, we all jump up and down again. Thank you all for staying. Are we all pro-choice? I really thank Carol and Judy and everyone else who worked so hard on this rally, and I think that it's very clear that we really are pro-choice, and I will not deliver all my detailed remarks on why we need to stay that way. But as you all know, 19 years ago, the 1st of January, abortion was legal in only a very few states in this country. And when Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton was handed down by the Supreme Court on January 22nd of 1973, we got complacent. And we thought that our rights were being protected by the United States Supreme Court. The very vocal minority did not believe, obviously, their rights were not being protected anymore, and they did not believe that they couldn't turn things around. They coined the very popular and emotional term pro-life, and they started working, and they got our United States Congress to take away the right that women had to make choices about themselves by taking away federal funding for women who needed it to have abortions. They also started working electorally, and they have been very, very successful in many states in this nation. And they have chipped, and they have chipped, and they have chipped away at that right. They also, obviously, I don't think they alone elected Ronald Reagan, but clearly they got a good friend in the White House who started putting people onto the federal court system to chip away at the right on the federal court level. And then the current president of the United States, unfortunately, changed his mind about what his position was on abortion rights. Boo. And so we are where we are today. And there are, I can give you all the statistics. I think a lot of you know them as well as I do, but we're at a very, very scary point in our history. The court is going to hand down the Planned Parenthood of Southeastern Pennsylvania versus Casey this spring. When they decided to take the case last month, it was put out into the press as though it would not overturn Roe versus Wade. And that was picked up by the press. That's not true. No matter how the Casey case comes down, it is either going to it's going to return so much of the control over the abortion issue to the states that it's not going to be legal to be able to make the kind of choice that women have to make in a lot of states in this country. And they also actually might, I don't think they'll actually say we are overturning Roe, but they're going to come very, very close to it. Now, you Democrats, and most of you here I think are Democrats, I can tell by your signs, have a choice on Tuesday. And you have a lot of pro-choice candidates, and it's wonderful that you can make your decision not having to base it on that issue. But Republicans, we've got to start working to influence the Republican platform. We've got to make George Bush understand that we will not tolerate his position on choice. We're going to be electing a delegation to the Republican National Convention that has 3 anti-abortion leaders on it: Gordon Humphrey, John Sununu, and Kathy Gray. But the majority of the delegates that are going to the Republican National Convention think just like we think. They're pro-choice. But they have been, not like those of us who are here today, but they've been like the vast majority of people in this country. They have not wanted to talk about the issue. We've got to let them hear from us, and we have got to make sure that they understand this is not a partisan issue, and we in New Hampshire, who are Republicans, have worked just as hard on this issue as a lot of Democrats have, and we've got to make the rest of this country understand what we've done here in New Hampshire. Thank you.
And now for the words you've been waiting for us to hear, our last speaker is going to talk, not that everyone hasn't been wonderful, but I know it's cold. Our last speaker is going to talk about how women in politics can make a difference in our lives. This 4-term representative has introduced bills that support women on every level. She is an Olympic quality champion of the poor and the disenfranchised. She is currently running for governor of our state. Can you imagine what kind of a difference she could make at that level of government? I've had the pleasure of introducing her several times. One of these days, I hope to introduce her as governor, but for now, I'm happy to introduce you to Representative Arnie Arnesen.
For a white male Anglo-Saxon jury making a decision about 2 people, neither of whom had any representation, 2 blacks and a woman. The reality is that we haven't been part of the solutions. We haven't been at the table. Someone said to me the other day, "I know your problem, Arnie. You just think you'll be better than the men." And I said, no, not better, but definitely different. And they said, "Well, you're not good on the hard issues." I said, "The hard issues? What are the hard issues?" "Oh, you know, the economy, jobs, foreign policy." I'm running for governor, remember? And then I said, no. I said, "What am I good on?" "You mean I'm good on those soft issues? You mean issues like education, healthcare, the environment, choice, the issues of 1992? You mean the issues that are defining why the economy is in failure? Why are we in failure? Because CEOs are complaining that they can't afford to provide health care for their workers, and they can't compete with the Japanese because it's too expensive, and we have 37 million Americans without access to health care, more than the entire population of Canada? Well, suddenly that soft health care issue sounds like a pretty hard issue for 1992. But let's talk about that soft educational issue. That issue that means that our kids can't compete with the Japanese and the Koreans and the Germans and the English and the French because they can't read and they can't do math because we forgot to make the investment in them. And let's talk about the environment, another good soft issue I just love. I was talking to a group of businessmen at a Rotary, and I said, "Oh, you don't like us environmentalists. You think it's anti-business?" Well, let me break it to you. The Japanese can produce the same amount of product using half the amount of energy and producing 1/5 the amount of waste. Boy, they're real stupid environmentalists. Matter of fact, it worked for them. They can produce more with less. But what's the problem with us and our country? The problem is we have failed to make the investment in each other. What have we known always? That is the most important thing. In this country, we've been obsessed with the cost of everything and the value of nothing. And now look what we have done. I tell a story now all the time. It's my favorite story, and I have to tell it to you again. It's the story of an old French general. And this old man goes out and buys this huge tract of land, and he tells his groundskeeper to plant olive trees. And the groundskeeper looks at him and says, "My general, you're 87. It'll be 100 years before we get any olives." And the old general smiles and looks at him and says, "Then plant them quickly." Understand, we have forgotten to plant the seeds for the future. We are failing in New Hampshire today. We are failing in this country today because we have forgotten about the investments we must make. Maybe it's because we were not at the table, not only to remind them, but to understand what that failure has meant. Because it is our children they have forgotten. And ultimately, the strength of any nation and the strength of anybody is that they understand that it is time to start. There's a wonderful thing in the New Hampshire Children's Defense Fund. Listen to what we spend every hour. Every hour we spend $33 million on national defense, $23 million on the national debt, 8.7 mil on the S&Ls, 2.9 million on education, 1.8 million on children's health. What are we, nuts? Understand they know these numbers too, but we know them best. It is time for women, because if we're not there, it will never be better. There is a Pogo cartoon that says, "I have seen the enemy, and it is us. I will leave you with something better. I have seen the change. It is definitely us." Your next governor, people. BPW with us to sing the chant. BPW, you want to come up and lead us with the song? BPW, folks? Or are they frozen to the ground out there? Okay. All right. Okay. Gonna get warmed up here a little bit.
Not much. Okay. That's okay.
Let's start over. We're going to do the refrain first, and that's what we were singing. Okay?
Thank you, leader.
We'll remember in November.
This is to the hymn to the Republic. You lead us, we'll follow.
We're gonna do the verse, not the refrain. We'll remember in November as to the polls we go. We'll remember.